Hi, I'm Jill Vitale-Austin with the Eden Alternative. Thank you for joining us here today. If you are watching this show live, we'd love to have you pop in the comment box and let us know who you are and where you're joining us from. And after the show is over, you can also put in comments. While you're watching, if you have any questions, put those in the comment box. I'm going to be keeping an eye on those, and I'll be asking our wonderful guests with us today to answer your questions. So I am thrilled today to have three of my favorite people in the construction world with me today. We have folks with us here today from Pinkard Construction, and Pinkard has been operating in the Front Range of Colorado for 59 years and has a long experience of doing senior living projects. I actually had the great pleasure of working with these folks when I was at Claremont Park, and we did I feel like it was an $80 million redevelopment project. I think that was the amount of it that spanned over, I don't know how many years. It seemed like forever, but you all made it go, the time go by much more quickly because you were so great to work with. So thank you to Pinkard Construction. Pinkard was going to be a sponsor of our in-person conference that was going to happen in April. And obviously that got canceled, and they are continuing to support us. And this is an opportunity for people to learn more about them and to learn more about construction and that whole process since the conference didn't happen. So I'm really thrilled to introduce our guests today. We've got Tony Burke, who is the president of Pinkard Construction, Jeff Barnes, who's the Chief Development Officer, and Derek Stathis, who is the Director of Construction Management. Thank you all so much for being with us today. Glad to have you. So, you know, when we talked about the show, we were talking about a little bit about, you know, we're hearing all these things right now and reading a lot of things about the impact of the pandemic, right? And what we're starting to see works and doesn't work, not only for infection control, but for quality of life. And that's leading people to think about new projects, maybe redeveloping a current project, maybe if it's a big nursing home, is creating household models of care. And then there's also the other side of things, that if we don't keep our communities up to date, they really, you get to a point where they're not marketable anymore. So these projects should always be a top of mind for an organization, right? Looking forward to the future. So let's talk about what's happening right now in senior living construction. What are you all seeing?
So, Jill, thanks for having us. We're delighted to be here and excited to take part in your panel and just this discussion. We've got all different kinds of construction projects happening right now, and some of them are ground up, some of them are renovations to do some of the things that you're talking about, change some features or update finishes or change how a space operates. And then some of them are entire campus repositionings and just studying how best to, like you said, position a campus for the greatest usefulness for the future. So we've got some of every one of those flavors of projects underway as we speak, and they all have different, reasons for what business problems they're trying to solve, what advancement and innovation they're trying to achieve. So yeah, we've got a lot going, and therefore we're getting to see a lot of different approaches that different owners or developers or operators or whatever are taking. And some of them are very forward thinking, some of them are not so much so, but we get to see a little bit of all of it. So I'm not sure if that really answered what you were after, but that gives a little bit of a background on what we see up and down the Front Range. And between affordable housing and senior housing, that's about 3/4 the work that we do right now. So we're pretty engaged with quite a few clients.
Great. So, question. We've got people joining us. Hi, Liesel's here from South Africa. And we've got Kathy from Ontario and Laura Beck from Ithaca. Thank you for being with us today. And if you haven't popped in the comment box, please do. We'd love to know you're out there watching. So I guess that was one of the things that I was thinking about a little bit is it's such a challenging time, right? And there's a lot is unknown in the future. And so organizations are moving ahead with projects that are already underway, I'm assuming, right? Are you having people reaching out to you now for new projects? Or are kind of people on hold, kind of pausing to see what's going to happen in the next year? What do you think's going on with that?
We've seen some of both. I mean, we haven't had any projects that were underway pause, indefinitely. Well, I guess that's not true. We do have one right now that is probably put on about a 3-month pause. We've seen a couple projects that were supposed to start in the spring that have pushed out indefinitely, but most of the projects that we've had on the books, even if they were delayed for one reason or another, they have gotten started. So people are developing aggressively, and just because of the pandemic creates some challenges, but it doesn't eliminate the needs. So
right. I think a little bit about Claremont Park, the project that we worked together on with that big redevelopment. The go or no go time was in 2009, when it felt like the world was falling apart, right? And I remember the former CEO, he made the decision to do it, and we were perfectly positioned to have a brand new building when things got better and when the real estate market had gotten better. And it's got to be a little bit scary, but you're right. Like, we still have to think about the future, and things will get better eventually, right? What about so we get questions at the Eden Alternative, not infrequently, with people saying, we know we need to do something different. We've got this really old building. We know we need to do something different. We don't know what to do next. Or somebody saying, I want to build a new community. And there, a lot of times those people are inexperienced with this, but they're like, where do I start? So what's the process look like if an organization either wants to reposition their community or build something brand new? What's the first thing that somebody would do?
Hey, Jill.
Hey.
So, you'd have to really obviously get down to a feasibility study. You have to do some research to make sure that your process is financially feasible, that your project will be. So there are people that do that third party. Most of the time, that's who you would hire, is somebody reputable that you can put their name on an application to get funding for the project. Once you determine that your project was financially feasible, you decide how you want your construction delivery to go. Would you like to hire your architect first and have them be a part of doing initial designs, and then have your contractor potentially just bid those designs? Or do you want to hire them both at the same time, or sometimes even hire your contractor first? It kind of has to do with your level of trust in your contractor. We could go a design build route. There's a bunch of different really nuances in how you deliver the project, but you'd get the design going. You would tell us what your budgets are. We would help the design team and price it along the way, and make sure that that you're getting the most value for your dollar for your budget, and make sure that the end result comes in on budget. At the same time, then we're working through a bunch of front-end entitlement problems, checking out easement issues on your property, getting with the building departments to check out if it's even possible to build that type of project, the height restrictions. So many different details are starting to get worked out, and the contractor and the design team are really doing that hand in hand. That is roughly, that's about a year, honestly. Even if you got on it, it'd be a year of going through, depending on the size of the project, obviously. But
right.
it's a long process, and it's really getting a lot of authorities having jurisdiction on board, getting on your side or on the owner's side, it'd be getting the financing together, deciding how you'd want to fund it, and then advancing the design and the budgets.
Great.
I think I would add in addition to that, Jill, that assembling your team early, your entire team, is huge. It's extremely key to having a successful outcome. There are so many different moving parts and pieces, and having people in place to really help with that every step of the way, it's a big deal, and it helps uncover problems and arrive at solutions early, so there are no surprises.
And when you say the whole team, what do you mean? The architects, the contractor?
Architect, the contractor, consultants, your finance people, key stakeholders in the organization. When you start doing your programming, which means understanding what everything's going to look like and feel like and how it's going to operate and function, I think you want to gather as much input, and that's often funneled through 2 or 3 people on the owner's side. There will be interior design people that may come in that could be independent from the architect. Sometimes they come with the architect, and then engaging the fire department. Derek said this earlier: engaging the jurisdictions having authority as early as possible, so they know what you're doing. Talking with them now, that's as important, if not more important, than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And we seem to have lost Tony. So Tony, if you're watching, just go back to the link and come on back in. Sometimes we have, especially right now with so many people being on the internet, sometimes we lose people and they can come back in. And, from the Eden Alternatives perspective, is if you are operating a community right now and you're going to do something new, you're doing a repositioning or redevelopment or whatever it might be, or if you're building new and some of the people that will be moving in, is engaging the residents, right? And the team members in that process. I know when we work together, having resident engagement in what do we want this community to look like? I mean, that's how we ended up with a great art studio. That wasn't originally on the plans. And it was a team, the maintenance director and some residents who said, oh, this is something that's missing. And we were able to figure it out. So that's absolutely key as well, right? Getting the people that live and work in the community, they know better than anyone, right?
And your vendors and suppliers, they have thoughts and ideas that help improve the outcome down the road, as opposed to getting down the road and going, "Boo! I sure wish we'd have put a door in over here so we can make deliveries easier." But as many of the team as you can assemble early on, the better the outcome.
Definitely. And we've got Tammy here from Lakewood and Kathy from Washington, D.C. And then Kathy says, my husband is watching from, he's also watching with her from Ontario. So thank you all for being here. Did I just cut somebody off?
No, Jill, I was going to advance on that a little bit. That made me think of something. When you start talking about programming, something really unique that's happening right now in the COVID world, some of our clients are trying to figure out whether or not they want to advance with their design that was already done pre-COVID, and try to understand, do I still want to go with dual occupancy rooms and get that in while I can? Not necessarily do I want to, but I still can do it. You don't know what's going to come down from the authorities or the state in the future. Maybe dual occupancy rooms aren't even allowed, and you can technically get away with it right now. Who knows? That's a little bit risky. Potentially, you have to go and fix everything to single occupancy. But there is that weird line right now with what can I get away with that I've already designed, or what do I want to wait and find out on later?
Well, and let's talk about that a little bit. What are some things that we're learning from this pandemic situation that would impact construction? And how do you design a building differently? And Pinkard, you have been getting together a bunch of thought leaders from the senior living space to really think about these things and talk about some of these things. So what kinds of things are there that we should be thinking about that you're seeing?
It's a really good question, Jill. There are so many things to tackle, but I think one of the biggest topics to tackle, and it's a really difficult one, and we're tackling it right now, and that is how do you minimize or eliminate that isolation? it's just such a big deal in the senior community today, and so important that these folks and their families have access to each other. And so it's not an easy one to tackle, but some of the things that are being considered along those lines are, additional outdoor amenity spaces and places for people to, to gather and meet that might be a little safer. And it's a little tougher to accomplish, in colder weather or different climates. But still the need is there. No question about that. So that's a really big deal. The filtration and air quality, indoor air quality, and bringing in outside air, what those systems need to look like. How can you apply different technologies that are coming available today to your already existing HVAC units, your air units. Those are some things that are really being tackled hard today because that's one of the biggest deals. It's one of the biggest issues that we face. Other things are touchless, faucets and doors and lights and elevators and that sort of thing. The voice activated devices is another big item that's been given a lot of consideration to. And I think that we've learned that maybe some places don't have as good a backup systems as they need, and so the need for additional power generating systems and that sort of thing, along with sterilization. There are people and products and food and deliveries coming and going all day long, and probably all hours of the day. People moving in, that sort of thing, and so trying to figure out really efficient but effective ways to create those clean environments for people to come into the buildings and feel safe when they do so, and feel like that they're keeping others who are the residents and the staff working and living there safe. It's a lot to tackle. I mean, that's sort of the tip of the iceberg, but it's just a handful of things. I think circulation, some of the things we may see in design, we may see greater site, larger corridors. Who knows today what we're going to see, but they're all out there, and we're trying to uncover them as quickly as we can so that we can see the future, so to speak.
Yeah.
And not only just for this pandemic, but to become more resilient against future crises. There will be other crises, and so hopefully this will prepare us to tackle anything that comes down the road. Does that answer your question?
It does. Yeah. Tony or Derek, do you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, definitely. Being a Eden associate myself, when I'm meeting with potential clients, I'm always trying to challenge at least the industry as a whole, the professionals that I'm talking to, or even some of the clients. Do you want to potentially create a perimeter control to where you can maintain that quality of life on the inside and it doesn't become 6 foot away from everybody all the time and ultra sterile? Could you do things like advance the screening measures on the perimeter of your building, all out have an on-site testing laboratory? If you have resident nurses on staff, you certainly could do this. So thinking about pushing that control out to keep that quality of life in is where I'm leaning to. Or at least that's what I'm trying to bring up in meetings I'm involved in.
So will you say a little bit more about that? I want to make sure I'm understanding that. You mean keep supporting life in the community by making sure am I getting that right? I don't know.
Kind of like the bubble mentality, right? Mm-hmm. If you can guarantee that everybody that came in was safe and good, then you could really minimize that risk. And maybe that's where you try to put your control, because that control is not sightly, let's face it. And I'm all about just maintaining that quality control. I mean, my grandfather's in assisted living right now. It's just an absolute mess. It's so hard to go see him. The rules and regulations are crazy. He's not hanging out with his friends. He's not able to talk. So really it's very personal to me too. So I'm just trying to think of ways that you get to maintain that quality, that life balance.
Absolutely. Thank you.
The use of technology, finding ways for people to connect technologically, big deal. I think we're going to see more and more of that as time goes on. And whether that's technology itself or creating spaces where people can, sort of gather without gathering.
Yes.
So many things being looked into today.
Absolutely. And we've got a couple comments Jennifer asks, are employee break rooms and respite areas being thought out as well? Keeping and retaining them could be improved with design and better places to take a breather. Thoughts on that? So employee spaces, that's.
Yes, though I think that is being considered. We were in a just a roundtable session with a couple of different designers here recently, and that's one of the topics that came up is exactly that we have to give thought to that, because if we don't, I mean, we still have a business to maintain, and being able to keep people who are working there, staff members, feeling safe and feeling cared for is a big deal. So I think that is being considered without question. Great question.
That is a great question.
Yeah, there's a lot of considerations for employees and keeping them safe, as Jeff said, and a lot of that not only is them being able to take breaks and relieve some stress and whatnot, but just the ease and convenience of getting checked in at work. As you're clocking in and then doing whatever temperature checking and questionnaire health screenings to enter your shift, just making that as easy as possible, as well as making sure that you are properly outfitted with whatever the necessary PPE. So keeping the stock of PPE to keep your staff safe. But that's another consideration design-wise. Historically, storage area is the easiest place to cut, when you're trying to cut square footage from a building and whatever. But now that operators are trying to keep more and more PPE on hand, storage is crucial. I mean, so that you're not dealing with a just-in-time delivery of PPE, you've got enough stockpile to cause your staff to be confident that they're going to be kept safe.
Yeah.
I think that even in addition to that, Tony, that's a great point. Emergency food storage, is something that maybe wasn't quite as at the forefront, but that's something that's being talked about quite a bit too. And I think really some consideration given to what that might look like, what types of things you would store.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and the break room side of things sometimes at the end gets cut down, right? In size, gets value engineered down. And where's the place that doesn't have any windows and is kind of a corner where we can stick this? And Camille from Christian Living Communities, that was always one of her big things, is we have to make sure we're taking care of people. And that means having a nice space for people to not, to have a breather and have some space. So thank you, Jennifer, for bringing up that great question. There's a comment from someone who's joining us on LinkedIn. We're actually going live to LinkedIn for the first time today. And so this person says, bring the outdoors inside, create spaces that appear similar to outdoors, use sunroom areas or sitting areas to create an outdoorsy effect. The common missing link in communities are live plants that reduce stress, boost mood, and concentration, along with cleaner indoor air by producing oxygen. And that makes a lot of sense, right? My parents live at another building that you built. They live at Holly Creek here in Denver. And if they didn't have a balcony when they had to stay in their apartment during the times where people really couldn't leave their apartment very much at all, I don't know what they would have done. And if they couldn't get outside and go for walks. So nature is critical. And we're actually hearing that right from our governor, who says, yes, stay away from people, but make sure you get outside, because we know how good it is for our health. Are you seeing any trends with things like that?
I think from the discussions, not just from the discussions we've had, I think that there's a real live consideration being given to that. I think it's, again, it's one of those things that maybe for years it seemed like you wouldn't make space for it, that it wasn't quite as, as important. But I think we were starting to see that even before COVID hit. I think we've started to see some designs incorporate a little bit more, bringing the outdoors inside, just if nothing else for warmth. It's, it's healthy, but just to, make you feel at home. You want to feel at home. I mean, it is your home. Why wouldn't you want to feel at home? And it gives it that feel as well as that quality environment.
Absolutely.
I love the suggestion, and I think it's out there. I know it's out there being talked about.
It is a great question. I mean, we have many projects where we have installed what they call living walls, walls of plants and flowers, and figure out how to get those watered and properly sunlit. There are other projects that we've done, not in the senior living space, but where some natural resources of nature, whether that be light, whether that be earth, rocks, dirt, water, air, all that kind of stuff, is really exemplified. And it would be interesting to see how some of those best practices find their way from a more commercial or educational space into a living space, and particularly senior living. So, yeah, I'm sure that it'll happen, but it's going to take some people with some appetite for innovation, and probably going to take some proof of the benefits too.
Yeah.
Yeah, solar tubes. We've installed these on a handful of our projects. Like Tony mentioned, though, it hasn't been in the senior space, but some of you might even have these at your home. But it's basically a skylight that can go through a mirrored tube and provide pretty bright sunlight, or daylight at least, in any room of your house, and it's just kind of piped down through there. So these solar tubes are a great idea to get really like natural sunlight coming down.
Absolutely. Real light versus the fake lights that replicate outdoors, right? Let's make it real as much as we can. And whoever this person who's, and I don't have the name, and I'm sorry, but somebody on LinkedIn said a group of residents will feel great purpose in watering those plants. And that's so important, that it's not just about the plants, right? It's about people, if people that live in a community want them, but people caring for them, and it becomes part of life. Just same thing with animals. So thank you, whoever that mysterious LinkedIn user is commenting. Glad to have you here. And if you have questions or comments, please put them in the comment box. We'd be glad to have our experts here answer your questions. So let's talk a little bit more about the pandemic and the impact that's having. Is it making an impact on construction costs, or the time it takes to actually build a building? What's going on there?
Cost-wise on the front end, we're honestly a little bit too early to see major impacts of it. Where you see it right now is really in production and material shortages. I think everyone, at least if you haven't seen this yet, I hate to have to tell you, there's a national appliance shortage. It's going to be really tricky to get an appliance for your house. It's real hard to get a couple hundred pairs of them or sets of them for some of our projects at one time. So where there's production shortages or problems with people not being able to man those production facilities adequately, then you end up with some material shortages associated. Lumber for a while went through the roof due to the demand for single-family homes. Single-family homes then making what was perceived to be a huge increase in that it is just you by yourself. There's just you and your family in that space, right? So single-family homes went crazy. The wood, the lumber associated did, but it has come back down. So honestly, a little early for actual cost. It's not. There's some costs with development that are tangible in the way of increased costs for insurance, specifically builder's risk. There's a lot of confusion in the industry or opportunities for clarification, let's say, of how builder's risk can cover you in a potential pandemic related issue with labor shortages, or if you have what's deemed an outbreak at your community and you need to shut the project down, who pays for those delay costs? So there's a lot of information and groups that are trying to make sense of a lot of this, but it ultimately has resulted in some pretty increased costs for builder's risk insurance. And then the lending process itself is taking a little bit longer on the front end. You have certain banks or financial entities that are looking to actually get COVID type facts out of your community, infection rates, anything that they can get to try to assess the risk associated with funding your project. So yeah, once we actually get on site, it's not taking longer as long as there's no delays. We have safety protocols in place, especially if it's an occupied remodel. We have our own entrances. We have segregated working space. We have check-in tents where we check temperatures and do all the appropriate check-ins of all of our employees and keep them segregated and separated from the staff at all times. That doesn't exactly turn into an increased cost or increased time of construction or a delay that you can put your fingers on, really. So that is at least what we're looking at is cost right now. You guys have anything to add to that?
Not really. I mean, labor still is in short supply and high demand, so labor costs are not falling, and we don't foresee them falling. It's just like Derek said, a little bit of a wait and see mystery on what's going to happen with material pricing.
I think there's opportunity in some cases to pre-purchase if you know you're going to be underway and products are available now and they're available and you can purchase them and get them. You know, there's some amount of storage costs that can be associated with that, but depending on the timing and the need, the timing of the need, there are opportunities as well as the other side, where you might save a little bit of money by purchasing in bulk or in quantity. So I think it's a mixed bag. I think each project has to just weigh the merits and make good decisions. And again, the sooner you're thinking about it, the better you can make an educated decision.
Absolutely. Thank you. And so, it was Jeanette Rogers. Thank you for putting in your name. That's who's been commenting from LinkedIn. Now I understand why she has such great comments, because Jeanette is a thought leader in all of this. So Laura Beck has a question. And she'd love to hear about any participatory collaborative processes involved in designing True Home. How far have you gone with bringing different stakeholders into the visioning stage of designing the physical environment? Any stories you can share?
And when you say True Home, can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
I think what Laura is saying is, if it's really going to be home, then it should be a collaborative process to determine what does home look like? What does home feel like to me? Laura lived for a lot of years in a co-housing community. That's a very collaborative process of people. And I shouldn't be describing co-housing because I've never lived there, but the people that live there play a critical role. Everybody works together to design what things look like. So I think that's what she's getting at. Laura, please feel free to put in the comment box if I'm missing that. So any experiences or things you could share about times that you've had that kind of collaboration?
Yeah. So we just finished a very large project up at Fraser, formerly Fraser Meadows up in Boulder. And that project was, I think the planning, before we started doing anything with it, the planning process was about 2.5 years. And throughout that planning process, so the board of directors up there was very involved every step along the way. But the board of directors was very, I shouldn't say insistent, but they were very protective about ensuring that they had some residents that were on not only the building committee, but that resident representatives were in every single planning meeting that took place for that project. So that's a lot of meetings, as you can imagine, over a 2.5 year period of time. But they were diligent about making sure that the residents' voices were represented at every single meeting. So, and it was great. We had, I think it was 2 designated representatives, resident representatives from that committee that were in every meeting, and it was great because you got consistency across over a long period of time. You didn't have to explain to new people who were just showing up or whatever. The resident, the committee, and the residents on that committee were able to then go back and disseminate information with other residents in other venues, and it worked great. I mean, so the design team and construction planning team were constantly able to acknowledge that and incorporate it. So it worked as well as I've ever seen it.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, Fraser Meadows is a great community. I was talking with an architect one time who said that collaborative process, and when you talk about collaboration, that a lot of times, and he was talking about they were building a school, designing a school for the deaf. And he was talking about in his prior experiences, there was collaboration up until the point of value engineering. And then it was like, oh, the decision makers and those money, it got smaller and smaller. And so he was very much focused on making sure all those voices are involved when you get down to that part of the process too, because that's where sometimes it can go off the rails. Were they able to retain resident engagement during that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And not only through the complete duration of planning, but they didn't come to every meeting during construction, but they came, I think it was once every other month. So roughly every 8 weeks, those same representatives would check in and see how the progress was going during construction as well. So that continuity never went away.
That's awesome.
Jim, a little bit of that question too has to do with the type of building that you're constructing. The resident council approach and their attendance at some of the construction meetings, they can affect, of course, the overall vision of the project, a lot of the common spaces, but another great way to get them involved is if you're building independent living to provide upgrade options. At Claremont Park, we did kind of a full-blown package, and you can go as crazy as you want with this. And a lot of my teammates would kill me for even offering it up. But before, we have done full-blown custom builds, even to the point where if you wanted to move a potential wet wall or something that had affected the floors either above or below you, that the architects then would redesign that in. Now that's a very extreme nature, but anything that you can do to make those residents feel like they had a choice or had a decision to affect the way that their home is going to look, it certainly creates a little bit of a heartache for your contractor, but for the ones that have experience doing it and they can put all the parts and pieces together to make it pull it off seamlessly, it's a great way to have them have some of their vision on their own space.
So thank you for bringing that in. And that it leads me to another question, which is how do you choose the right general contractor? I mean, because if you're working with a general contractor, construction company that doesn't get it and doesn't want to get it, it's not pleasant, right? Because things happen during these processes, especially like when we were doing construction on a site that was fully occupied with residents and team members. So what do you recommend people ask? What should they look for in finding a partner for a project? Jeff, you might be muted if you're trying to talk.
How's that? Is that better? Thanks. I started to say one of the first things you want to do is check references. You want a contractor for your partner that's been there and done that understands your community, that is culturally aligned. I think that's a really big deal. I think that your partner, you have to really understand each other's business, and I think you have to ask a lot of questions. Ask a lot of questions like, how much of this have you actually done? Call references, get references, check references. They're huge. We spend a lot of time, as you know, working together on these projects and sorting through issues. And you want people that you have a good feel about, that you can trust, that essentially you're looking for a trusted advisor, somebody who's going to not let you go down the wrong path if they can keep you from it. And sometimes that can come at the expense of not doing work. And that's okay. I think you want somebody who's really there for you. And I think one of the best ways to find that out is to check references, call people you know in the industry, ask them, how it went. I think you're looking for somebody who really, really understands what it means to work side by side with residents and staff, because often the buildings are phased occupancies on a large one. And so we're working in occupied spaces where people have actually moved in side by side. And so we need to pay attention to things like access and noise, safety first and foremost. it's our job to keep everyone safe and make sure that they feel comfortable in their own home. I think that I mentioned this earlier, cultural alignment is big. We have worked with some folks in the past where we didn't check that. This has been many years ago. We didn't really check in and ask those questions to see how we did business, each of us. And it probably didn't go as well. We learned a lot from those experiences. And I would say you're really looking for a contractor who will set expectations. Ask this question: will that contractor set expectations early? Will you follow up to make sure those are being met on a regular basis? And at the end of the day, no matter what happens, do the right thing. When problems arise, you come to the table and you take care of business. You do what's good for the project, not any individual or any stakeholder in the project. Those are some of the things that I would recommend, that questions you ask and things you look for. And Tony and Derek, I'm sure you guys have others to add.
Yeah, I just have one more thing to add to that. For anyone who's looking to build a certified community or a community able to accept Medicare, Medicaid, that you should really ask your contractor if they've been through that process. That is hugely complicating for the contractor to involve the state at all levels, because you still have to involve the state and the city, and oftentimes they don't play nice to each other. And you have to have gone through this multiple times to really have gotten a handle on it like we have. But that really, that we're talking serious implications in the time that it would take for you to get your operating license if it wasn't done right along the way. Mm-hmm. So anyone who's building that's a really key question to ask them.
And transparency. I think transparency is another key element. You really want to know that that you're getting what you pay for, and that that your contractor's looking out for your dollars and they're spent wisely, and making sure that design doesn't get way out of control over here, and all of a sudden we have to stop and start over again. We need to be guiding you every step of the way so that so no one team member gets too far out of bounds. It's our job to keep people within the guardrails as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Tony, did you want to add anything to that?
No, they covered it well. I don't have anything.
Didn't they? Well, and that's one of the things. Before I actually went through a project, I didn't realize how many problems do come up. Not because anybody did anything wrong, but there are all of these places where kind of like, oh crap, moments where you have to figure things out together. And so having people, like you said, that you can trust, that will be transparent, that will guide you in the right direction is key. And I'm gonna toot the Pinkard horn for you. And just, I think it's more than just saying the things. One of the things that we loved, again, being under construction in a community with residents and team members living and working there for years and years, is the people that lived and worked there felt like they knew your team and they trusted your team. And I remember your foreman on site would have coffee and donuts with residents. I think it was every week, and would talk about what's going on with the project. And the residents appreciated you all so much. They had a come get a cold one table at the end of the day on hot days for your team to be able to get something cold to drink. And then you all said, hey, we teach us about the Eden alternative. We want to go to certified Eden associate training because we want to understand what you're doing at this community. And those things, there's such value in all those things. Because if you're doing a project on site with people living and working there and they don't feel like they're heard, they don't feel like they're honored, they don't feel like they're known, right? We've lived some of these things together. There can be a lot of problems. So I think it's something very special that you all do, really getting to know the people that live and work there. So
thank you, Jill.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you all were great to work with. And then this might be Jeanette popping in again. Create spaces for shared and companion during construction versus after. Increases occupancy revenue and offers affordable options to residents. I don't know what she means by that, or whoever it is that's commenting. maybe it is opportunities for flexibility. So private rooms and with the option to have it be shared. I'm not sure. I thought I understood the question when I brought it up. Now I don't. So whoever's out there asking that question, if you want to pop in with any more clarification.
Do you think that's in an occupied space where there's a renovation going on, maybe?
Perhaps. We'll see if Jeanette pops in with any other comments on that. So what? Let me see here. What else would you want to share with people right now? So we've got people who are watching, actually from around the world, who are watching and learning from you all. What other words of wisdom do you have for our audience? Things they should think about?
You know, one thing I would offer, and I think we mentioned this very early on in the discussion, but there's a tremendous fear of isolation out there. And I think the more that that people can get together and talk about what's going on and be vulnerable and share those fears and just get them out in the open, get them out in the open, talk about them, and engage with any of the organizations who are working hard to get past this is very much appreciated. We started the senior think tank you mentioned earlier, and it grew from a handful of 4 or 5 people, and now we're up to about 10, and we expect more as we go along. And the more people that engage, the more ideas come forward, and the faster we will find solutions to the problems that come up. They're going to keep coming for a period of time, but I think I would offer to folks out there, there are a lot of organizations who are working hard behind the scenes to get past this in a positive, proactive way. And so if you have an opportunity to engage, and don't be afraid to ask the hard questions, because they're there. We just have to get them on the table and tackle them.
Thank you. Thanks.
And I would add to that, be brave, try new things. Because a lot of the things that we've seen that really work well to benefit residents and benefit communities is just because somebody had a bold idea that they went ahead and tried, and it worked, and they shared it. And it's amazing. I mean, how many of these communities across Metro Denver or the Front Range region of Colorado, everybody's kind of in it together, even though a lot of people are competitors or whatever. It's you're competing for your customers, but when the residents win, everybody wins. And so it's just, that's one of the things that we appreciate about the senior living community, is just how much of one big team everybody kind of acts like. So be bold, and then share successes.
Not only that, Jill, as we've talked in the past, a lot of folks have been there and done that and have seen a lot in their years and have way more experience than some other folks who are trying to tackle some of these problems. And so, it's there's just no silly questions. Ask them and just go, why are we doing this? Yeah. We had one of the residents up at Fraser decide to go do some research on indoor air quality just in his own space. And he found this solution and went and hired our mechanical contractor to come in and install it, and did all his own research. I think as one of the folks up at Fraser put it, he's smarter than you and me times 2. And so he did, and so I had a chance to talk with him. He's like, oh man, I am now an expert. I can tell you that this works and where to go and where to get it. And we're like, those are the kind of people we need speaking up. So
yes,
just never know.
Absolutely.
And I would add, for any of the people watching or listening that are thinking about starting a process from scratch, and it'd be their first time going through a commercial construction process, our friends on the residential side of things haven't done us any favors at all when it comes to the perception of contractors. Those of you who try to get somebody to come work at your house probably know what I'm talking about. It doesn't have to be like that in the commercial world. In fact, with us, it's completely transparent, open book transactions, full backed up cost reporting. The level of trust it's honestly pretty easy because everything, you have access to literally everything, the way that the contracts are set up. So it's not as daunting as you might think it is to go down this process on the commercial side.
That's a really good point to make. I think you're right. There is kind of that reputation out there sometimes because of some residential builders. The other thing I meant to point out earlier is, you know, that you all, and this again is the sign of true partnership, is you all, when family members couldn't see their loved ones, what did you all do? People that were up on the second floor of the building and higher. You brought in a cherry picker, right?
Yeah, we had some cherry picker visits. Yeah, we had a manned aerial lift that we would put family members in and elevated them to a balcony or a window or what have you, so that they could visit a resident who was not allowed to come down from that second level. Likewise, we built what the Fraser folks had called love pods, LOV, which stands for Loved Ones Visiting. And they're kind of three-sided plexiglass, little booths almost. Think of like a phone booth, but that we could place, you know, outdoors on a patio and just help facilitate some visits with, you know, much missed loved ones and their residents. So, yeah, we found a couple different ways to be creative and ways to just help some of our partners, and actually we kind of spread them around town, not even strictly to our clients, but just places where we could identify the need and the usefulness. So it was fun. It's fun to say yes sometimes.
Well, and that's for anybody who's out there watching. So Pinkard works in the Front Range area of Colorado. So you probably can't, Liesl in South Africa, they're probably not going to go there and work on your project for you. But that's the kind of partner that you want to find, right? And you all are in it, and you're not just about building a physical structure, right? You care about what you do, but you care about the people that live and work in these communities, and those kinds of things that shows. So my hope is for everybody watching that you find that kind of partner when you have a project that you want to do. So any other last words before we close things out today? I want to make sure I didn't forget to ask you anything important. Good.
I just want to say thank you, Jill, for having us on. It's been a pleasure, and for everyone who joined in. I'm really glad to see the interest and the engagement, the questions that were asked. And so what a wonderful opportunity for everybody who's involved in this today, and certainly lots of opportunity in the future. But thank you so much for inviting us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tony, Jeff, Derek. It was wonderful having you with us today. And so your website is Pinkard, is it pinkardconstruction.com?
PinkardCC.com.
CC.com. And so is that the best way for people to contact you if they have questions or want to follow up on anything?
Absolutely. That's a great way to reach out and make that connection for sure.
All right. And I see Meredith put the website in the comment box. Again, thank you so much for being with us today. I learned a lot, and I really enjoyed spending time with you. And thank you to everybody who tuned in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.